I am delighted to be with such an inspirational and diverse panel today to talk to you all a little bit about COP26, but specifically looking forward in terms of how we as a Global Greens movement can build momentum ahead of COP27. And perhaps I can start by introducing myself. I am from the Green Party of England and Wales, although I've been very much involved in the international Green movement for the last sort of 6 or 7 years now. And I, together with Anne-Marie Behera-Bake from Burundi, who hasn't been able to make it today, we have been co-convening the Global Greens COP26 working group. And this is the first ever working group that Global Greens has had around the COP conference, but it has for many years been sending annual delegations to UNFCCC climate change conferences. So today we are here with a lovely bunch of COP26 delegates who are going to share their experiences with you and thinking a little bit ahead how we can all work together to put pressure on our own national governments and at the international level ahead of COP27. I will introduce the speakers as we go. But first, I'm going to spend just 5 to 10 minutes talking a little bit about the Global Greens work on COP26, what we've done, and a little reflection moment on the Glasgow Climate Pact, which many of us are aware was weak and insufficient, unfortunately. But that's why we're here. So, I am going to the next slide now, just to give you a very brief outline. We will have presentations from all of our panelists. We will try and keep this within 1.5 hours. And there will be, of course, an opportunity to have a question and answer with yourselves in the audience and with the panelists. So just to introduce Global Greens work on COP26, some of you may be very familiar with this. Some of you may have no idea that this has been going on now for at least 1.5 years, when we set up a working group to plan activities and events in the lead up to COP26. And we've been having more or less monthly meetings in which we discuss COP-related matters, but also identify areas to mobilize around. So we did a series of webinars with Green ministers, with Green parliamentarians, and around specific events, such as Earth Day, such as the Biden Climate Leaders Summit, all to get Greens in our Global Greens network to start being more engaged and talking about COP. We also put together a COP26 demands document with 5 clear demands that we wanted to make to COP26. And as part of that, we made a video with our Global Greens delegates in all of our different languages, which I would highly encourage you to check out if you haven't seen it already. It's embedded in the link to this event as well. And maybe just to say that we had 13 Global Greens delegates at COP, and they released 2 different statements, one after week 1 and one after week 2, which are on the Global Greens website. And just a little word on Greens at COP, because despite so many hurdles, despite COVID, despite a really difficult immigration rules for the UK, and despite all the restrictions on travel, we did have over 100 Greens on observer delegations in Glasgow. And these Greens were from over 40 countries, which was, I think, well beyond any of us anticipated. And this includes, of course, 7 Green ministers who were at the negotiating table, because increasingly we have Greens in government. in 10 countries in the world in total and rising. I mentioned before that we had 13 Global Greens delegates. We also had 11 Global Young Greens delegates, and this was the first ever Young Greens delegation to COP. So it was a really important moment, and having such a global presence in Glasgow was very uplifting, and it was very inspiring. And we're really pleased that those who made it managed to play an active role in both the COP conferences, but also all the fringe and side events that we had as Greens. However, it's really important that we mention the accessibility issues here. We had 2 Global Greens delegates that did not make it, and that was due to various reasons, but mostly with COVID-19 and delays on visas, and also I would say massively vaccine inequality. And up until the very last minute, it was very hard to know if any of us would make it. So it was not ideal, and even accessibility in the COP venue itself was very limited. And I'm sure lots of you have already read about how many civil society delegates were locked out or blocked from certain rooms. Just a quick slide then, reflecting on the Glasgow Climate Pact itself. I want to say that this is by no means exhaustive, and a lot of you will have read already a lot about what happened at COP and what was agreed at COP. But some important things to reflect on from our side, and these are things that also got picked up in our delegate statement, was, of course, we have some positives. We have a very slow incremental change, but what we did see is at least, nearly 200 countries signed up to this agreement. It is non-binding, and that's not, we know that that's not good enough. We have over 130 nations pledging to reach net zero by 2050. It's positive, but it's not nearly ambitious enough. However, for the first time, fossil fuels appears in the text, and this was a really pivotal moment at COP. A lot of us, of course, it was towards the end of the second week, we were really hoping that this would go through, and many of you will know that this was later watered down. However, fossil fuels are in the text for the first time in the history of all COP conferences. And of course, what we have seen is this heightened ambition and commitment to increase the nationally determined contributions, so the countries' climate plans for mitigation and reducing greenhouse gases. However, what we also know is that we are well on track to go way beyond 1.5 degrees of warming, and in fact, even if pledges are fully implemented, we're headed quite easily towards 2.4 degrees of warming. We know that the loss and damage mechanism failed. For those of you that are not familiar with this COP terminology, loss and damage is all about making amends for particularly human-caused climate change, so by the bigger and the richer countries that have had a greater impact. For example, a few years ago, $100 billion was approved for countries to give to poorer countries to help them adapt to climate change. And this has not even been, this promise has not been fulfilled, and nor has it's increased its ambition in COP26. And I know that some of our speakers will touch on this in particular, because as we all know, it's the global South countries that are suffering at the hands and the actions of those in the rich and industrialized North. And again, I talked about fossil fuels being in the text. We're really happy it's there. For a long few hours in the negotiations, the exact wording was phase out, and now we're looking at phase down. So again, it's not strong enough by any means. Maybe one reflection from my side about even being in the COP venue, and what was so staggeringly shocking was how many fossil fuel lobbyists there were everywhere. And they were, effectively the biggest delegation at COP, with over 500 delegates. And lots of countries, of course, brought fossil fuel lobbyists on their national delegations. But again, what we're seeing increasingly is this trade fair environment where fossil fuel lobbyists have a lot of power and a lot of influence. And this is also partly why we've seen this watered down text. However, there was another side to COP, which I don't want to miss out because it's really important. And there were the presence, I would say, of activists in and around the COP venue day in, day out. And of course, during the middle pivotal weekends, when we all took to the streets to form a green bloc in Glasgow, we had over 100,000 people out. And I hope that some of you in your own countries were able to join similar climate marches on this global day of action. I think, this was perhaps one of the more uplifting moments of COP for some of us, and it is encouraging to see how much action there was. One moment that was very special for me was a moment, and I don't know if there's anyone from South Korea here, but as we were marching in a Greens bloc at one point in the street, the South Korean Green Party came out with their flag and met with the Green bloc. I wasn't aware that they were present in Glasgow, but it was a very nice moment having that encounter in the streets and in Glasgow of all places. But it was certainly a strong and vibrant presence of Greens, and that was felt. So very quickly then, looking ahead to COP27, some of you will know already that it's going to take place in Egypt. However, it's very far from the capital, and Mohammed will tell us more about this shortly. But we do want to start thinking about how we can keep up this momentum and keep going to both prepare our Global Greens delegates to go to COP, but also to expand our network of engaged Greens across Global Greens in building and keeping up the pressure in our own contexts too. So I'm really happy to announce and say that, the COP26 working group will continue. It's now been named the Climate Working Group, with, of course, a focus on COP. And so it can be in place for many COPs to come. And we really welcome any of you that are interested to please get in touch with our Global Greens Secretary and come to the meetings, because they will certainly continue, as will the work. And it's really important, of course, that the working group and the COP delegation go hand in hand. So we hope that we'll be sending another at least 13 delegates to Egypt in November. Of course, Egypt's going to be a massively different context. We're talking about a military dictatorship. We're talking about limited opportunities for mobilizations. And it's also in what I imagine will be some kind of gated community in a tourist resort. So I think these are really important questions to think about in terms of how this shapes our work for Global Greens at COP27, but also, of course, all around the world in our own regions and in our own national and local contexts. So I am going to finish here, because this was really just a refresher of a little bit about what work has been going on. But we're, of course, also here to hear from our wonderful panelists. And I'm going to pass on now to Mohammed Awad. Mohammed is the president of the Egyptians Green Party. He's also vice president of the African Greens Federation. And he was both a dedicated member of the COP26 working group and a Global Greens delegate in Glasgow. And Mohammed, we're really interested to hearing some reflections from you about your experience in Glasgow and what you see, and perhaps what some of your hopes are for COP27 as we come and descend to your country. So over to you, Mohammed.
Okay, thank you, Alice, so much. And I would like at the beginning to thank the Global Green for all what they have done for us and give us chance to participate in the activities of Glasgow, getting a lot of experience there. And by accident, we are going for the COP27 in Egypt, so I have to apply what I have learned in Glasgow. Let me say at the beginning that I refer to the positive outcomes from participation in the COP26 in Glasgow, because every time during our meetings, I'm starting with the negative outcomes. Today, I'll change a little bit and make it the positive outcomes. Well, in conclusion, I have seen the participation of women in COP26. They already announced from the United Nations report, I have seen that around 45% of the participants were represented by women. I think it was more than 50% actually. That was a good sign for the interest of women in the climatic change issue. Second, I have seen a lot of youth there, inside the venue or outside surrounding the venue. More than 80% in my expectation was just blue for years. So I'm expecting the same percentage at least in Sharm el-Sheikh COP27. On the level of the activities, already we, the Global Green, have done our best. There were three activities there inside the venue. There were many in the headquarters of the European Green and Green of Scotland. And I'm thinking seriously how we can do that in COP27. Because I'm still I'm expecting some issues concerning these points. On a level of organizations, well, we have, before starting or traveling to Glasgow, actually, we were well prepared for that. All information we needed were available in our hand. All the coordinations that we needed were done, well done also. And even the coordination among the delegates themselves were prepared before going to Glasgow. It's true that we faced some problem there, but because we already were well prepared, we could overcome a lot of these problems. On the level of the politics, already I have my concern for the whole COP26, because my feeling that we couldn't get or we couldn't achieve the targets that we were there to do it. And the main disadvantages that we were banned to listen to the official speeches by each country. That's make a lot of confusion to us because we missed the strategy of each country. So it's true that we have done our best to participate on the discussion and the different workshops, but actually because we were missing the strategy, so we couldn't follow well and we couldn't make a good influence in that. It's true that every one of us have done his best to get the maximum information that he can get it, but not till now, and that's the point. Till now, we didn't get the speeches, the official speeches of each country. That's very important to us because we are going to ask in COP27 what they have done what they have promised and make the comparison according to that. One point already, Alice, right now, you said that it's possible that to increase a little bit the number of delegates in the COP27. That was a point because if 5 persons, it was very difficult for them to cover everything going there. A major problem in my mind for COP27, that a location 5 hours far from Cairo, 5 hour driving. That's a major issue for us and real challenges for all of us. Why? Because Sharm el-Sheikh is not a populated area, not a populated city. So if we are going to organize some marches there, some demonstrates, some activities like that, actually we will be there to do it for ourselves. But the message is not that way. The target of the marches, of the rallies, of the activities is to announce to the people of the country that there's something abnormal, call their attention that there is an event, and that will make them follow what we are doing. If they are following what we are doing, it means we already succeeded to exert pressure on the leaders during their discussions. I recommend to you from now that we have to start seriously and urgently to put a plan how to handle this issue with the Egyptian government. But I have to say that due to a certain internal circumstance in Egypt, I know very well the Egyptian government shall not be flexible enough to allow us make some activities in Cairo. But at least we have to try. And if we want to try, we have to start it right now, because a decision in Egyptian government take a long to get the final decision. We are planning an Egyptian Green Party to get a space, special space for some products how can I say it, but taken a space as a pavilion in the venue of the Congress. Why? Because already we start to make some contacts with the companies who are specialized in the green energy, on green products, to introduce their products there. That will help us to do something else also in our minds. We are trying also, or proposing to you, that we have to make a contact with the ministers of the environment in the different countries. At least we have to make it with 20 ministers over 20 countries, 10 from South, 10 from North Globe. I recommend also that we have to establish specialized group from the working group, specialized group for the follow-up, for the political follow-up of some events. What happened before COP26? Myself, I have done such a mistake. I didn't pay much attention for some news concerning an agreement between the European Union and some countries in South Globe concerning agreements and conventions between the United States and some countries in Africa. I didn't pay much attention for that news, although that it was a trap for the South Globe in COP26. A second trap, the announcement of the declaration for the financial package 3, 4, 5 months ahead of the COP, make the whole South Globe running there to Glasgow on individual basis. Every one of them want to get his piece of the cake at that time alone. So they missed the coordination and cooperation. They missed a one-hand voice there in Glasgow. How can we handle such issue in COP27? That's one of the points. That means that we need a specialized group who can follow the political events, the political progress, the political negotiation specifically among North and South. Otherwise, I'm expecting again the same trap will be done and the same fault and no positive regarding the loss and damage for the South Globe. We may be able to make a contact with non-governmental organization in Egypt to join us during the Congress. But my questions, because I'm not fully aware with the administration or how we can do it. I mean, how we can involve them with us. That will make good strength to Egyptian green during the Congress. For the political statement, I think during our meetings through the climatic group, I think that we need to prepare some political statements every month. And before the COP27, 2-3 months, we'll intense the issuance of our political statements. And political statements, not to read it, but to spread it and distribute it specifically to the member of the Egyptian governments, because it means for them, we are alerting, we are coming, we don't need a problem, we want a successful Congress. Well, thank you. That were all my points that I would like to raise right now. Maybe during listening to my colleague, discover something new. Thank you a lot, Alice. Floor is you, please.
Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you for your insights on Egypt and also for your concrete proposals moving forward. It sounds like we have a lot of work ahead of us. We're now going to travel from Egypt all the way over to India with Snigdha Tiwari. Snigdha is a human rights lawyer. She's a climate justice activist, and she's also international secretary of the Uttarakhand party in India. Mohammed, I see you have your hand up. Do you have one final thing to add before we move to Snigdha?
Yes, please. I forgot the most important point to me. I would like to know a decision to nominate Egypt for COP27. Do you have any idea whether we have a plan B for a hosting country or not?
Not at this stage, but in theory, there will be a pre-COP and a COP. So there should be a partner country for the pre-COP. And maybe some of our attendees here know that already, or it has not been announced yet. But we need to keep this on our radar and look out which country that will be. For COP26, it was Italy. So I'm going to move over to Snigdha because I see time ticking on very quickly, and we will hear from you, Snigdha. So take the floor.
Thank you so much, Alice, and thank you everyone for being on this call. Before I start, I can see a lot of people here, and I just want to briefly tell the condition in which I am taking this call. We have an elections going on in Uttarakhand Parivartan Party, the local Green Party with which I'm associated. We have fielded a lot of candidates, and there is good campaign going on. Other than that, the climate is really harsh for us. There was no electricity from past 2 days because of the snowfall, and I requested a hotel to let me in and so that I can take this call. So before coming to Glasgow on 17th and 18th, we faced in Uttarakhand, we faced very harsh climatic conditions, and it's a story of us every now and then where we lose electricity, lose internet connection, and that is how we are facing climate change right now. To start on that note, and to quickly take you back, I can see Paul as an attendee here, and he quoted me in his article. He's from Australia, and he said, while they bicker on the punctuation marks, hundreds of people died because of climate crisis we are facing. So to raise the sense of urgency and to show that what happens in COP, when I attended COP, it was my first COP, and before that, it was a whole lot of a process to reach Glasgow. It was challenging for all of us who were coming from different countries. And I found out much later that the challenge to be part of COP was very minuscule before, but it was increased more by the restrictions we faced due to COVID. And particularly those who are coming from global south had multiple more who are coming with more unequal backgrounds, social and economical, and the visa restrictions. So it was very hard, and the entire delegation of Global Greens could not be there. The challenges, I would like to address them first, were not just at the personal level that all the delegates faced to reach Glasgow, but even at the COP venue when we reached, we saw there were great difficulty in entering the venue. On 2 days when the World Leader Summits were organized, there were just 4 passes for more than 10,000 organizations. To there was such chaos inside COP, and for me, as for my first time in COP, it was very disappointing to know this is how the COP is operating, where all the delegates from across the world are present there in different capacities, and yet they do not have real access to COP. They do not have a voice inside COP. Activists were there, but later on we saw the activists use the platforms. Otherwise, they became blue zone activists, where they not just they were raising their issues outside on street, but even inside the COP to give voice to those who were fighting on street. They became blue zone activists inside COP, and they started protesting and raising voices on different issues which are very crucial for us, given the climate crisis we are in. So these are the challenges that we face. Other than that, as Alice, you rightly mentioned, that we saw a lot of like companies inside COP, all these fossil fuel companies. It was more like a trade fair, which I was not expecting to see, wherein it was difficult for it was very difficult for activists and people representing women groups, indigenous people, to reach those ministers and country delegations, to talk to them, negotiate on different issues that they are facing, and get them to text on the climate pact. But it was very much easy for these lobbies of fossil fuel companies, nuclear companies, to have a good reach on the country delegations who were actually working inside the conferences. There were these big hotels, eating places where they were taken to, they were speaking, but on the other hand, we had very limited to no access. We mean all the people who are on the right side in the fight against climate crisis and in the fight to save this planet. So this was another challenge which I saw. But to move on to the highlights from the challenges which we face, uh, to have the whole group together in Glasgow was one of the most important thing, which I felt individually was important. It was important for all the delegation to see that there are all these people, particularly for the green community in Glasgow, that we are fighting with such spirit and with such dedication from years, that we have attained something so far. And that also gave us the sense of responsibility that Global Greens is one big political family, which is the one of the, I think, only global Greens political party, like the party for across the globe, has the potential to do much more with the strengths that we have. So that was one of the most important thing that came out when I meet all of you in Glasgow and see what potential we hold and how we can strategize and plan better for the coming COPs. Further, when I move from those things, the other important thing which really was a highlight for me in COP was the day of climate action, the day of when the entire street, even the official delegates like Caroline Lucas, and with all these people were Thomas Waits, all these people were on streets in the Green Bloc with the people of Scottish, like MSPs of a Scottish Green Party. Everyone was on street along with the young, like where I saw an infant being carried by his mother wearing T-shirts saying we need climate justice. I saw old people marching on the street. All of these people showed the strength of of the movement. All these people gave the hope to all of us that the real change will come from the street. The real change will not come from those who are sitting inside COP who are doing nothing. So like they did come up with Paris Agreement, but what Paris Agreement wants to deliver uh, is beautiful on text, but how we are going to implement it, how we are going to achieve it, is not what all these countries are talking about. All these world leaders wants to deal, it seems. But the real movement is there. The real movement was there, and that I believe and I see hope in that movement when thousands of people rallied on the street. They were experiencing all seasons in that one day when where there was wind, there was rain, there was sun, and then they were constantly marching, giving out just one message that we have to save this planet, we have to save the biodiversity around us, we have to keep the global temperature below 2 degrees, and ideally, like what we committed to Paris Agreement, that it should be 1.5 degrees. So that was one of the most beautiful and empowering thing what we experienced in Glasgow at COP. Other than that, what was beautiful was when we all met in the Green Hub, because that is where we realized how strong green as community is. That is where we actually got to interact with all the people who actually have official passes. I remember my very small interaction, which was one of the highlights for me, with Caroline Lucas, when I approached her and I said that, okay, we talk about fossil fuel subsidies, we talk about this that, but can we put this not put this pressure on those who are in global south and say and put a pressure on global north to stop extracting these things, to have a cutoff date, and we start from there. Like we have a cutoff date that after this there will be no extractions, because you global north, a lot of these countries are the biggest importer of fossil fuels. So why not put a finger at them and say you stop it, like the way we do it in climate financing, that the climate financing is also very related to like to keep the global temperature as what we idealize to achieve 1.5 degrees, because the developing countries are actually those who come from global south do not have the means for it. And what promises we made in 2009 regarding 100 billion like dollars for climate financing per year, we haven't done that till today. So global north who used all the resources for their development, who have exploited this planet so much that till today it's their emission. It's like what they did in industrial era. It's particularly their emission, the carbon from that time, which is around the atmosphere, and they are still failing to take those responsibilities. And that is how it shouldn't happen. So even in this case, when we talk about fossil fuel industries, the fingers should be definitely on global north, and they should be made answerable for that. So there were these small interactions that we had with those official delegates, because coming from Global Greens, we had the passes of observer delegates. So for us being as observer delegates, we could just observe what is happening inside the plenaries or in different meetings. The challenge was also with that due to COVID, these meeting rooms like all these meeting rooms have some capacity, that after this we would stand in long queues and suddenly we found out, okay, the capacity of this room is full. Now you have to strategize to go to some other room. So these were additional challenges which came this year, particularly because of the COVID restriction we faced. But I think as a, like, for like, I'll come to my solutions, uh, uh, or maybe I should start with my solutions. As Global Greens delegation, we achieved a lot this year. We had a demand charter ready, like what Global Green as a delegation wants, and we tried to coordinate as much as possible. But there is a lot of scope for improvement on us. Like we can be better coordinated for COP27 in such ways that we decide at the very initial stage, like once everything is finalized, we decide, okay, who will go for the negotiations, say in Article 5, who will go for loss and damages, who will go for climate reparations, and then at the end of the day, everyone meets. So it needs to be more specific. It needs to be dealt more professionally, more like even with our demands, right? We should have that common demand charter that we had this time, but we also need to deal with all of these very specifically. As I could totally agree with Mohammed, as Mohammed said, we need to have a specialized groups, and those groups should have the documents ready. Because what I feel, as Global Greens, we have a role, the role that is to have, is to enable those negotiations and to put those points across to those who are actually negotiating inside COP. So what we failed to do this time is to achieve that in some ways. What we individually did was fine. For example, for we I managed to meet the environmental union environmental
I think we've lost you, Snigdha.
that would, and if we will be able to achieve that, that would be one of the success that we will get from COP 26. This is still ongoing, and we have constant meetings with all those seven young individuals from India who met the minister. But other than that, at the level of the Global Greens, what I feel is that I was seeing there was this another group who had their small draft ready, and they were going to all these offices, delegate offices of different countries, and they were giving this, oh, okay, on Article 5 we have these submissions. We would really like to explain this to you. If you can give us 5 minutes or just read the document, and please negotiate on our behalf inside the COP. So these are the additional exercises that we need to do. We need to increase the size of our delegation. The size of delegation that we have was of 13 delegates. But if we can increase the size of the delegation, that will also be very helpful. So these are few things I think we can do better on. But otherwise, the Global Greens has really great presence everywhere. Everywhere, wherever all the delegates were going, we were constantly representing Global Greens. There were multiple interviews, like we were meeting journalists, and a lot of things were doing and were happening all together, and all of that was happening, and the Global Greens was shining through that. Like, these are the delegates and these are the people. What needs to be done at the global level is to have more and more such groups involved. uh, Youth groups, women groups. We need to expand the Global Greens Women Network. We need to add more. As Carla, I really was happy to meet Carla there. And when she added all of us after Glasgow to the Global Greens Women Network group, and she said, I'm making everyone admin, and you add more such people. So we need to connect to more and more people to come together under one umbrella, maybe loosely at the starting, but that needs to be done, because those whom we are fighting against, all these uh, all these people, all these corporates, the government who are with the corporates, they are united in such ways that they are just profit oriented. They want to exploit this earth. But when we take the all others together, we can achieve what we want on time. Because what is the essence here is, we are definitely, the time is our enemy, and we are losing all of it against time, because we read all the IPCC reports, and we have really less time, and the actions that which we are committing to, I'm not going on the implementation part, but which we are committing to is far behind what we actually should start doing now. So these are the few things that we should think about. Other than that, what can be done, particularly in Egypt, can come the best from Mohammed, because he understands the situation on ground. So what we can do very early, how we can strategize on organizing ourselves there, because that is one of the crucial part which Green Hub did. And Alice, I congratulate you for that. That the Green Hub was great success, and Green Hub gave us that space, a little space, where we directly interacted with official delegates, the ministers who had the official passes, and we were like, okay, these are our points, and they had their own points. So we need such space for COP27 too. And other than that, we need a lot of preparations beforehand, where before the delegation goes to COP27, we need a lot of preparation, a lot of documents done. So yeah, I'll just end there, and I just would say that, see, we as like we together is one family. In Hindi, we have this phrase, we say Vasudev Kutumbakam, which means this whole world is one family, and we have to fight this crisis as one family with one objective, which we already know, which we believe in, and with the action plan that we all should come up and just deliver upon. And we must see COP27 as one of the most important tasks ahead of us. And yes, on that note, I would like to wind up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Snigdha, and thank you for joining us from such difficult conditions, and also for highlighting what a mammoth task COP is in terms of going in prepared. And we know that people work on this full time all year round. And it's a struggle for any civil society delegation to make their voices heard. And I'm really happy that we, as a COP26 working group as well, have even been able to build bridges with the Global Greens Women's Network. And Carla, we're looking forward to hearing from you shortly. First, we're going to pop over to Kenya to hear from Martin Agindo, who is the leader of the Green Congress of Kenya, and he is a former member of Parliament. Martin, we're really looking forward to hearing from you on your thoughts, insights on COP26 and looking ahead to COP27.
Thank you very much, Alice, and thank you very much, colleagues, fellow panelists, and our audience. First of all, allow me to take this opportunity to thank the Global Greens for having accorded me and my colleagues an opportunity to be at the COP26. And allow me also to say that I need to put a disclaimer here as I proceed to make my remarks that I have been with the Global Greens for the last 4 years, going into 5. And that time, and having attended the COP26, I'm not sure whether I have my identity correct. I think I left COP26 in an identity crisis, in the sense that as a member of the Green Party, and I know that the Green Party, the Green spectrum is wide. I think even within the Greens, we have the leftists, the rightists, and the moderates. But I take the Green community to be people who subscribe to the Green ideology and who subscribe to the Green Charter as stipulated in the Global Greens Charter. And I also have a reflection, having come from COP26, that the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was founded, I think, in 1992, and the agitation was then led by the environmental activists. And the environmental activists later evolved to form political parties, and today we have the political party where the Global Greens is a network of these political parties. Now, when we attended the COP26, I was left wondering, and I know I may not get an answer, but I was left wondering, what is the place for the Global Greens in the eyes of COP or the UNFCCC? Do they really recognize the Global Greens as a player in the fight against climate change? Do they really formally recognize that? Or are we just insisting on being there? I mean, given the history. So that is the identity crisis that I left with from COP26, because I thought that if the UNFCCC recognized the role that has been played by the environmental activists in the run-up to the formation of the UNFCCC, then they need to accord the Global Greens their rightful place as the custodian of this ideology that seeks to safeguard our planet. And earlier today, I was part of a session that was discussing how we can increase the impact of Global Greens as a political movement. Indeed, we are a political movement, but please forgive my being naive here. I think we are evolving, yes, but sometimes we appear like we are still not a fully fledged political movement. When people see the Greens, I think, or when we identify ourselves as Greens, in my mind, we pass as activists more than a political group. And I think we need to increase our face politically so that we can find our rightful place. I'm not sure how we can do that. But sometimes we say that there are faces that make people identify you that you're political. I know we are rich in menu in that direction. We have our Elizabeth May, we have our Frank Ebenezer, we have so many current and past Green leaders who would be the face of our movement, politically speaking. I'm just not sure how we can leverage on this, because there are people who enhance believability on a cause if they're part of that. And I have been a former member of parliament, but I'm not a former, I've not been a Green member of parliament. So when it comes to the space of Greens, I look like an activist. I don't look like a politician or a leader in that space, really. I'm just wondering how we can leverage on current and past political faces that can make the Global Greens look like a political movement. May her soul rest in peace. I wish we had our late Wangari Maathai, who was really a face that would have filled that space. So the second thing I want to say is that I went there and I went to the COP and I expected to contribute on the loss and damage. And fortunately, I had an occasion to attend the loss and damage. I mean, I had an opportunity to attend loss and damage meeting, but it was a very brief meeting. And the outcome of it in totality gave me the impression that loss and damage is not an agenda at the COPs, really. If for just to appease a few people who insist on it, it would come in passing. And I think it begs this same question that who is rightfully placed to press for this agenda on the loss and damage? We appreciate the role that corporations play in this, and Alice captured it very well when she said that at the COP we had fossil fuel lobbyists, I mean, outnumbering any other contingent, any other group of delegates there. And so, and I think in a way, these business corporations see the Global Greens or the Greens as their enemies, for a lack of better word. That we are fighting them, and if they are in charge of anything through their lobbying, then the issue of loss and damage will never find space anywhere for a decision making as we have expected. And then last but not least, I also observed that in the attendance in the COP, normally the people who are in the meetings, who are the parties to the meeting, are people in their 40s and above. And they are discussing a critical issue that is affecting all generations, current and future, young and old. I think it is imperative that we can pressurize, I don't know the word to use, but we can advocate for the diversification of the COP membership, the Conference of Party membership from each and every state, so that at least 30 to 35% of that every delegation from every nation is made up of people under 20. Because an old person, of course, was once young, but you are young in a different environment. The younger generation today are young in a different environment. Their feelings can best be captured by themselves. Their fears can best be captured by themselves. And these are things that need to be included in the negotiations, those feelings. And as such, I think we need to give more space to the younger generation in the negotiating table. I know COP is coming to Africa, and I think it is an honor, and maybe that would have been a very good platform to mainstream the loss and damage, because in Africa and in the global south, that is where the loss and damage is biggest. But I've had presentations from Mohammed with his fears already, wondering if we have a hosting. We have a host in store just in case. But I think we look forward to doing this, and I'm proud of Mohammed in his initial thoughts that he has shared, how they are preparing as the Green Party of Egypt. I think we need to really work on those issues that he has highlighted if we are to make this a success. I want to wish you all a success and fruitful deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you also for reflecting on some of the disillusionment, I think, that COP brings, and that is unavoidable when we have such inaccessible structures. And I think it's, you know, it's a real systemic issue with how the climate conference is set up every year, and it wasn't easy in Glasgow, and it's not easy to make an influence as a small civil society delegation either. But I see it as an opportunity for building bridges, at least, and with other civil society observers that are going to be there. We're going to hand over now to our last speaker, Carla Piranda from Brazil. And Carla is coordinating the Global Greens Women's Network currently, but she's also Secretary General of the Green Party in Brazil and one of its founders. Carla, it was a pleasure to meet you in Glasgow, and thanks so much for joining us today. The floor is yours, and before I hand over, I just want to say that please, to the audience, to pose your questions in the question and answer box. I see a few coming through already. I see a person with their hand up called Leon. Leon, we will come to you once we have heard from Carla. So over to you, Carla. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alice. Nice to meet you, Alice, Martin, Mohammed, and our lovely Snigdha. Love to see her, even virtually. I attended COP21 in Paris and COP25 Madrid and 26 Glasgow. I had the honor of being delegated by Global Greens. The participation in Glasgow was unforgettable for a few reasons. Our working group, coordinated by Alice and Marie and Snigdha, was very important. We felt prepared. It gave us unity. We represented Global Green as a true and cohesive team. The Global Greens Hub, organized by the Scottish Greens, was amazing. The quality of the debates, the materials, the diversity of representation, the lots of green parties that passed through there provided us an exchange of information and learning at all the times. It was really an unforgettable experience. About COP, I see the 10,000s of people walking on the street of Glasgow made it clear that society is ahead of governments. The climate justice expression repeated by thousands of people on the streets of Glasgow and other countries echoed around the world. The message was clear. Civil society is more organized and ready to voice demands that put the world the path to an ecological, balanced, and above all, socially fair future. The participation of civil society, women, indigenous people, young people, traditional population, was much more representative than the unreachable official delegation. The Glasgow Climate Pact was a step forward, but not enough. which was clearly demonstrated by the almost successful concern of the end of the subsidies to fossil fuels, a point that was turned down in the final agreement of the COP, as well as the mention of coal. You know, I'm a Brazilian, and such as a Brazilian can say without fear of being wrong that the situation in Brazil is especially disastrous. We deservedly received twice the unwanted award of Fossil of the Day at COP26 for the lack of coherence between climate and environment protection promises and concrete actions. And what now? What to do for COP27 in Egypt? I think we have to fight for diversity and more representative official delegation, because if government left something to be desired in Glasgow Agreement, the massive presence of young people, women, Black, indigenous people at meeting was one of the great things of COP26 and should set the tone for our meeting in Egypt. As a suggestion, I would suggest that Global Greens, through the already existing successful COP working group, I think we should organize successive virtual meetings with representation from federation, from lots of green parties, representation that must consider diversity, to define a timetable on a line of action and themes of debates to be developed by the Greens. To develop an unified proposal document, of course, respecting the local realities, but that make it clear that being a Green Party is not being any party. We are a planetary party. And as it, all Green parties of the world must be involved in this process and work and objectively in order to support society and put pressures on government. Each Green Party, I think, each Green Party in coordinated actions should present proposals to their governments, giving publicity to our demands. We at Global Greens should make other worldwide campaigns in multiple language and coordinated. It's a proposal. And as convener of the Global Greens Women Network, I have to talk about it. And we know that there is a focus of climate justice because we already know climate emergency affects everyone, but not equally. In a global context of inequality, which vulnerable groups are disproportionately affected to the consequences of human actions on the planet. Women are at forefront of this crisis. Approximately 70% of the world's people living in poverty are women. We are still the heads of 40% households, the poorest households in urban areas. In rural areas, we are predominant in the global food production, the working force, but less than 10% of us has owned a land. In place most affected by ecological disasters, there is a huge increase in domestic violence. And for women from traditional communities, such as indigenous peoples and quilombolas, the situation became more painful. Quilombolas are among the groups most affected by climate change in my country, in Brazil. However, the demands are even more, I forgot the word, less people hearing demands than from quilombolas than for indigenous communities, because indigenous communities have a greater articulation and national, international levels, which doesn't mean that the impact on indigenous women is less. I like to finish saying something that Celia Chacriba, who is a teacher and indigenous activist, she said it's important to say that our bodies, our voices, our territories are under strong pressure and threat. The deforestation of our forests bring a series of incalculable damages to environment and also to humanity. We women are directly affected. We are the extension of the world, which what hurts the earth hurts us too. And that's my conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla, and in particular for shedding light on the indeed extremely challenging situation in Brazil, but also on indigenous rights and the need for these to be more prominent and have greater voices. And I see a few things coming in the chat already. One, a proposal for Global Greens Indigenous Network, which we're extremely happy to see because it is absolutely needed. And also I want to go to this question now from a participant specifically on loss and damage. And it's an element that a lot of you have picked up on already. This participant is Pefi Kingi. I'm sorry for my pronunciation if that's incorrect. And Pefi is telling us that in Pacific, regional and sub-regional and national fora, a lot of them have been debriefing on COP26. And with a collective wish and intent to emphasize loss and damages and climate migration. Okay, so the question is, has the working group discussed emphasis that it will strengthen for the Egypt summit? And also what will be different about the approaches adopted for this year, given last year's experience? Perhaps I can start by saying the working group has not yet started planning for Egypt, but it would be really interesting to hear some ideas from our panelists on this issue, and particularly because informing our demands for COP26 last year, I know that loss and damage was something that came through very strongly as a priority for a lot of global Greens. And I think often with COPs, perhaps the best way we can have of having success and doing things effectively is to have a targeted approach and focus, because there is so much to discuss. But loss and damage was certainly something that was universal in terms of our demands from different regions. So I'd like to pose this question to the panelists in terms of thinking about what emphases might be strengthened at the Egyptian summit, and whether there might be a difference in terms of approach from Glasgow, which many of you have already started to allude to. So I am looking around at my panelists and wondering who would like to go first to answer this question. Martin? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think it's a profound question, especially given the fact that I've just been asking, what is our place in the eyes of the COP or UNFCCC as the Global Greens? But I think whatever our place is, it is imperative that our voices are heard. And in the Global South, our greatest concern is keeping the rising temperatures below 2 degrees, below 1.5, which is good. But our next concern is loss and damage. And I want to borrow from the presentation that was made by Mohammed Awad earlier, and also from Senigda, that we didn't seem to have coordinated with our parties representing our nation so as to put forward our concerns. I think it is imperative that parties coming from the Global South could organize themselves in a manner that help them put together their areas of priorities and their thoughts, so that the voice behind loss and damage can be bigger than the individual voices that are trying to push for loss and damage. And I think with that strategy, we are likely to mainstream this agenda. Because like Alice observed earlier, that there were about 500 fossil fuel lobbyists who were in Glasgow. They far outnumbered the number of global green delegations that were there. I mean, 10, 20-fold. And there is power in numbers to begin with, but then there is power in a collective voice behind a cause. So I think because COP27 is coming to Africa, which is the headquarters or the home of loss and damage, I think it is imperative that Global South put their house in order and really work with the civil society groups so that we can mainstream this issue. I thought we are a political movement. I don't know whether the UNFCCC distinguishes between political movements and rather political organizations and civil organizations. If there was that distinction, then maybe we could have given it the political approach. But if that distinction is not there, then we need to work with the civil societies and work with the parties that are coming from our countries so that this agenda of loss and damage can find its place at the negotiating table.
Thank you, Martin. Would any of the other panelists like to jump in on this question, specifically on emphases ahead of COP27 in Egypt? What are your priorities coming from your countries and regions?
Priorities.
Say again, Mohammed.
It seems that there is no priorities for anyone.
Please go ahead as our resident party in Egypt.
Well, as a matter of fact, I concentrate my thinking just in one point: how we can make a good public march in Egypt. If it is in Sharm el-Sheikh, forget it. That's my concern, my only concern.
And you don't perhaps think that there's other ways we can build momentum, at least online, in the lead up to COP27, to really highlight what's going on and the reality of the situation?
I would like to be very honest with you. I know very well if I am in the shoes of the Prime Minister, for example, or the Ministers of Interior Affairs in Egypt, I never ever shall accept a demonstration in Cairo. We have many, many, many problems. And they have concern that a peaceful march like that could transform into another form, which they don't like it. So that's the reason since the beginning they recommend Sharm el-Sheikh, because they will take the whole people far from Cairo, or at least far from the Egyptian people. They're trying to avoid a mix or a context. That's their problem. But for us also, it is a problem to go there, because it means that the Congress will start and end up with no any successful in our missions to call the attention of the people everywhere. But at least as I recommended to you before, that we have to start to make a correspondence or a context with the Egyptian governments, just to highlight to them that we are willing to do our activities in Cairo and listen for their feedback. Months after months, we may get a conclusion, a good conclusion with them, but we have to start. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you, Mohammed, and we're happy to have you there on the ground, and in the very least, and as a starting point. Snigdha, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Alice. I just want to answer this question only. The emphasis, a lot of things have already been covered in the this presentation of all the panelists. So I think the potential where I see, if I get to conclude what all we got from the presentation, is that the working group is really important, and the working group needs to have further specialized group, covered under that working group, where we start, like we have focused discussion on loss and damages, this, that, everything. But the question which Martin raised for all of us to introspect and deliberate upon is also very important, which should be done at the level of the Global Greens coordination and at the level of working group. Like, do we have that special recognition? So if I am, as per my knowledge so far, we do not have any special, like the UNFCCC does not have any special such recognition for political groups like that. We only have official delegates and then the civil society organization. That this is subjected to further corrections, and I can come back on that too. But then how do we take Global Greens to that level of us not just being an activist group, but also a political party, a political movement of that which we have the potential of doing. So this is also one of the things, but the task is a lot for the working group. And everything, and that includes not just the working group at the level of the Global Greens, that should have, as Carla very rightly said, from the level of the federation to the parties in different countries. So it needs to be a network of that, particularly for COP, other than the Global Greens activities that we do. So this is one of the things that we can summarize for and emphasize on. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Snigdha. I think that's a very clear and concrete proposal going forward, and we all know what a huge job it is in terms of preparing for COP, but also making the right networks and communications amongst our own internal network of Greens to ensure that we can put on as much pressure as possible. I see that Ricky has their hand up. Ricky, I'm going to promote. Oh, it's gone down. Ricky, do indicate in the chat if you'd like to take the floor. Ricky was a fellow Global Greens delegate at COP26, And maybe just a disclaimer to say that Carla has had to run. She has elections in Brazil this year, so she is very busy on the ground, traveling to different cities. Okay, Ricky, let's see if we can get you in the room. And I can see somebody called Leon who we will hear from shortly. Ricky is coming. Hello, Ricky.
Hello, Alice. Can you hear me?
I can indeed hear you.
Oh,
yes.
great, great. Oh, it's I don't know what our audience is, but it's certainly really nice for me to see Martin and Mohammed and Snigdha and yourself again after our what can we call adventure in Glasgow. Let's leave it at that for the time being. Sorry, I did have my hand up. A bit of a mistake, but I'm not going to say no if you're inviting me in. So, oh, actually, can I start? Oh, you don't need to see my video, do you? Because you won't let me.
I think we need our host to do that. I don't
You
think.
can try again.
Okay. Sorry, it's not a big. Oh, I think I'm there. Am I? Yeah. Oh, God, blimey. What was a very serious contribution by everybody has been ruined by my my background.
You're already in Egypt at COP27.
That's the link, Mohammed, because I did really want to listen carefully to what you had to say about the political situation in Egypt and the extent to which your government does not relish the thought of the sort of public demonstrations, if you like, or presences on the street as we had in Glasgow. And as you so quite correctly said, in terms of, well, you know, you live there, but in terms of Shark El, the proposed venue, it is, I don't know, for want of a better word, a totally unsuitable venue from the point of view of grassroots activists. And that is such a shame, because it's such a massively important aspect of every COP, is the extent to which the public can feel engaged, even if they're ostracized and ignored, but they can feel engaged. And we all felt that on the streets in Glasgow in those incredible two marches on Friday and Saturday. And not being able to do that, well, there's no point in doing it in Shark El Sheikh, because it's a tourist resort with 5-star hotels for 10, 15, 20 kilometers. And it's, well, there's nobody to demonstrate to, if you like, other than the world's media. So I inferred, Mohammed, that you might think the government is unlikely to have much happening in Cairo. And that is a great shame, because Cairo is a capital city with fantastic history. And, you know, that would be one big reason for people wanting to get there. Which reminds me, I'm going to have to row to Alexandria, because I don't fly. Have you organized my flight, my boat trip yet, Alice? I'll stop being flippant and say thank you very much for including me, and it's great to see you all again. I'll shut up now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricky. And just to put that last comment in context, Ricky had a wonderful idea for Global Greens to charter a boat to take Greens from all around the world to Egypt. I see we have Leon with us on the side of the panelists, and you had your hand up earlier, so we're happy to pass the floor to you. Millie, if you're able to enable camera, that would be fantastic.
I'm trying to enable the video. I don't know how. It says okay, but nothing's happening. Look, my concern with...
Sorry,
go on, I don't know how to
just
enable it.
Just down the bottom of your screen, you should be able to press start video. You've got the access rights.
Is that done it? Anyway, I'll get to what I'm trying to say. All the COP meetings, I feel, are a bit like the Davos World Economic Forum events. The key events happen between the capitalists and the movers and shakers, the people that really own capital in the world. And a few ministers and a few civil society people don't get near them or don't even get to argue with them. And even if you did get near them and argued with them, you're not going to change their fundamental priorities of accumulating capital and expanding the capitalist economic system and more growth. So, like Greta Thunberg said, there was a lot of blah, blah talk at COPE, and then they even watered that down. So the next event that's happening in Egypt is an opportunity to build a mass movement, as happened during the Arab uprisings, and they threw out that dictator that Egypt had for 30 years, and scare some of those capitalists and sycophants that want to expand the capitalist system. Because I can't see us making headway in changing the priorities of the economic system just by being on the periphery of their established meetings. So that's what I'm asking. Is there an opportunity to see another mass gathering that will scare these people and give ordinary workers and ordinary people from the ground level the confidence to step in and almost take control of the means of production and shift the way the capitalist economy is ruining our planet?
Thank you, Leon, for that. What I would say is quite an enormous question for our panelists in the time that we have left. But one thing I do feel that you're picking up on, which is a question that I certainly walked away from COP with, which is whether COP is really the right or the correct mechanism to deal with the climate crisis, because it's becoming such a trade fair, and we are all so frustrated with how slow and how blocked the progress has been. I think there are other initiatives going on within green movements and green circles that are different ways of putting pressure on. One of the ones that was quite present at COP was the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty. There's another one headed up by Caroline Lucas, which is the Global Alliance for a Green New Deal. These are all different ways in which we're seeing parliamentarians network and put pressure on their governments. But I do want to pass to the panelists to ask if they have any insights on this wider systemic question about capitalism and fundamentally as a key driver for the climate crisis. If you have insights to share on that, and we only have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask for this to be the last closing remarks from everyone, and an opportunity for you to leave any key ideas with the group in the meantime. Lorenzo, I'm not sure if we're going to get to your hand, so please do feel free to comment in the chat and we'll keep that going. Martin, I see you've unmuted, so go ahead.
Thank you, Alice, for this opportunity, and thank you, Leon, for that question. I cannot pretend that I'm going to answer, but I can respond. I think the world is being dictated by money, and money is in the hands of capitalists, and that has given them powerful tools. Number one, research. Number two, lobbying capacity. And as such, I think they're most likely always going to get their ways, as opposed to the people who are thinking righteously. I mean, I'm not sure if that's a good word. People who are thinking for the well-being of society. I think the profit will always stand ahead in a very subtle way. They don't need to be expressed by penetrating the negotiators and the parties, so that what they want is on the agenda and what they don't want is not on the agenda. So I think I'm glad I don't have the same diplomacy that Alice has in putting these messages across. But I'm glad to hear that they're out of the frustration coming from the COP as a platform to deal with the climate change. Other avenues are being pursued, and let's hope that our hopes can, our wishes can be addressed elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Mohammed? Okay. Snigdha, the final floor is yours.
I'm so sorry. There's an ambulance going, so there's some noise behind me in the background. I'll just quickly try to answer what your question about capitalism and how we see it with this world we are living in. The crisis we are in and the corporate greed has already destroyed this world so much that we cannot afford to take it any further. Now, as I would like to quote, not quote, just remember Caroline Lucas and her lecture when she talked about well-being and economy and how that should move. So I think that should be the approach that we should have. Like, this planet cannot take any further of exploitation, corporate greed taking over, and there is a limit to exploitation, and we have crossed that limit, and that cannot happen more. And our policies and everything should not be governed by that particular funda of getting more and more profit. It should be more and more about well-being of our rivers, our grasslands, our forests, ourselves, and the biodiversity around us. So on that note, I think just to conclude what I like with my closing remarks is that I still see us together as a very huge potential, and there is a hope that and that hope in all of us, and we can bring that change because we have no other option but to bring that change for ourselves, because otherwise the earth would not just be for us, but we are losing it for all the living forms around us, and that cannot happen. So there is hope, and we are strong enough to win this battle. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Snigdha, for ending us on that positive note. And I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists, Martin Ogundo, Carla Piranda, who has had to leave us, Mohammed Awad and Snigdha Tiwari. You've been exceptional delegates and exceptional contributors to all Global Greens work around COP, and we hope we can keep you on board ahead of COP27. I also want to invite those of you that have made it to the end of the session to please, if you're interested, join us in the climate working group to help preparations ahead of COP27. You only need to drop an email to our Global Greens Executive Secretary at secretary@globalgreens.org. And we're happy to continue the conversation via the app or on social media, so please don't hesitate to get in contact. And a big thank you to our translators, Mario and Daniel, who have been interpreting simultaneously throughout into Spanish. So thank you so much for helping us make this event one step a little bit more accessible to others in the Global Green Network. And a big thank you to Millie as well for making this conference happen. So thank you very much, everyone. And we hope to keep in contact and see some of you soon in the climate working group.